Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stacklehouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse, and this is episode 143. Today, I'm interviewing Lauren Vazzano. Lauren was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in the fall of 2020 when her children were just 2 and 4 years old. Since that time, she's been able to reduce her fibromyalgia symptoms to the point where she is now nearly symptom-free. We'll share her actual scores during our conversation. In today's interview, Lauren shares how she was able to accomplish this, especially as a stay-at-home mom with 2 little ones. That is an extra challenge. Lauren is also going to give some tips on how to do things like juggle making dietary changes when you're cooking for a whole household. She's got a lot of great tips. Lauren has said that she can trace her fibromyalgia symptoms back to the birth of her first child in 2016. And shortly after her diagnosis, she discovered the Fibromyalgia podcast and hired her own certified fibromyalgia coach. With her coach, Julie, Lauren was able to focus on improving her health and get better as quickly as possible, all while homeschooling her children. Now, she would really like to pay it forward by helping other moms just like her, moms who feel overwhelmed and need guidance to improve their health and feel better. Lauren is a student in our Certified Fibromyalgia Coach training program, and she is one of the coaches you can meet with when you schedule a consultation through our Find a Coach page. And just a quick reminder, the information that we share in this podcast episode is never meant to be medical advice, and it is not intended to replace consulting with a qualified physician or other healthcare provider. You will hear Lauren talk about the things that worked for her that may or may not work for you. Our intention is that you take the things that you learn here today, talk with your own doctor about what might work for you. And make sure you stay tuned after my interview with Lauren. I've got some additional free resources that came up during our talk, and I will list those for you and where you can find them after our interview. Now, here is my conversation with Lauren. Hi, Lauren. Welcome to the podcast. I've been really looking forward to having you on.
Thank you, Tami. I've been looking forward to it too.
Now, you listen to the podcast, and those of you who are listening, I always like to start with a little bit about your story. I think it's important for people to know who it is they're listening to and why they should listen to you. So why don't we start way back at the beginning? When were you diagnosed? How long have you been living with fibromyalgia?
I was diagnosed with fibro in the fall of 2020. Of course, we were about 4 or 6 months into the pandemic. And I believe now, retrospectively, that I had been dealing with symptoms for a long time. But because of the pandemic, it really made all of my symptoms a lot worse and very glaringly obvious that something was wrong and that I needed to investigate more.
Yes, I think for so many of us, the extra stress of that time made our symptoms worse. I know for a lot of my clients too, a lot of the things that they did to manage their symptoms, whether it was consciously managing symptoms or just things that you were doing, a lot of those things were also not accessible. Do you think any of that played into the part for you in your diagnosis?
Absolutely, it did. One thing I can think of is I was doing yoga every week, sometimes twice a week. And all of that, I had to stop. I tried to do it a little bit at home, but unfortunately, I had two little ones, two little kids, and they couldn't go to school. So I started homeschooling them. And so that made it so much more difficult. I had pretty much zero time to myself. Even doing yoga at home was really difficult. So all of these things, the yoga, I was also doing physical therapy, all of those things had to stop. And I pretty much only could focus on my children and my family. And of course, it didn't help that my husband was also working from home. So it was extra crowded.
Yes, it was such a strange time, like this alternate reality. But I think some of that, though, that you're talking about, like having your kids at home and trying to take care of yourself while you're in a role where you have to take care of others, whether that's kids or being a caregiver for a parent or whatever it might be, like that is a challenge. So let's talk a little bit about like that space there. What was it like to try to walk that line?
It was very difficult. It's still very difficult, but it was definitely worse then because my kids were 2 and 4 years old. So I homeschooled them for an entire year. Then, luckily, my oldest, my son, he started kindergarten, and luckily they were allowed to do it in person. So I was very thankful for that. So I only had to do it for 1 year with the two of them, but it was very challenging. I'm a perfectionist and an overachiever, so I probably took it a little farther than I needed to. I definitely didn't do the bare minimum, but I was constantly downloading teacher materials and taking it very seriously. So it was definitely challenging, and especially for the fact that there weren't too many activities that I could take the kids to outside of the home because it was the beginning of the pandemic and we weren't sure what was okay. I remember one story that sticks in my mind that happened to my husband and my daughter. He was taking the kids to the playground, and my husband saw that my daughter wasn't interacting and didn't immediately go running off into the playground, and he asked her why, and her response was, "They're people." And he pretty quickly realized that she thought you could only play when it was just us. It wasn't okay when there were other people. So that was the environment that they were growing up in. And that made it so much more difficult. It's much easier now being able to take them places and have them interact with kids. But thinking about it, thinking back on it now, it's completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I've heard stories like that or about kids that didn't feel safe without a mask on just because of the age that they were when we were going through all of this. That's so interesting. So, back to you, because today is about
Mhm.
you. So, what happened then after your diagnosis? Were you able to find treatments, medications? How did that work for you?
I feel like I fell on a diagnosis a little bit. I just knew internally something was going on, but I had absolutely no idea what it was. So I started, of course, with my GP, my general practitioner, and she flagged a couple things. She was like, okay, you probably have depression, you definitely have anxiety, a couple of the typical normal things. And I was like, but I think more is going on. So I started going to a couple specialists and first started with a liver specialist because I have some liver disease in my family's history. And then that led me to going to an allergist. And I did the whole panel thing on the arm, thought for sure I had seasonal allergies that were happening all the time. Turns out I had no seasonal allergies and that I was actually allergic to apples and carrots, which I was eating all the time.
Oh, yeah, those are 2 little kid foods, right? Like
Yeah,
apple slices and baby carrots, that was probably, like,
absolutely.
half your diet.
It absolutely was. And I loved them. That was the first kind of surprise. I was like, oh, wow, I need to eliminate these things and then see what's going on.
And I think that's a important thing to highlight for people because a lot of times when we think of food allergies or foods that might be causing us problems, we think of things like gluten, dairy, like bad in quotes things, but it could be good healthy things like apples and baby carrots.
Yes, yes. And it's very difficult nowadays because fast forward, I ended up going gluten and dairy free for other reasons. But combining that with no carrots and no apples is incredibly difficult to find food out, like pre-made food. It's so difficult because they hide them in everything.
Yes, and apple juice is used as a sweetener. Applesauce is used like in exchange for eggs and things like that. Yeah.
And even when you get a salad, you figure at a restaurant, okay, there's nothing else I can eat. I'll get a salad. They either have apples or carrots in them.
Yep.
So after going to the allergist, I had a suggestion actually by my aunt to try a rheumatologist because we have a lot of autoimmune conditions running in our family. She herself has lupus. So she recommended that I go to her rheumatologist. And she actually, thankfully, it always say it takes a village. She went with me. And I think that's the best thing because, of course, most of us going to a doctor's appointment huge amount of anxiety. So she really helped me getting an appointment and going to the rheumatologist. And in sitting there, I started listing off some symptoms that I thought were absolutely unrelated to each other. And then the rheumatologist kind of looks at me and she asked me a couple more follow-up questions. Oh, when you wake up, do you feel well rested? No, not usually. And when you wake up, do you feel really stiff in the morning? Like it's hard to get moving. And I was like, actually, I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, it is really difficult when I get up in the morning. I'm really stiff and it's hard to get moving and I'm really slow and my kids are running around and I'm like, I can't catch you. uh,
Right.
so and in asking me those couple extra questions, she was like, I think you might have fibromyalgia. Have you ever heard of it? And I had never heard of it. Luckily, my aunt had heard of it. So she was like, yeah, that might make sense. And so, of course, I went home, did a little bit of research, decided to search for a podcast and found you, Tami. Immediately started learning all I could about fibromyalgia. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized I fit the bill all across the board. It just fits. So I went to my follow-up appointment with her after, of course, doing some blood work as well, which definitely checked all the boxes. And so she ended up giving me the fibro diagnosis. And what I found most interesting about that appointment was even though it was only, I think it was only 2 weeks since my initial appointment with her, I had learned so much in that 2 weeks about fibromyalgia that I felt in talking to my doctor that I actually knew more about it than she did.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I had already in my head thought of a couple ways the direction I wanted to go with my healing and getting better. So she initially suggested some medications, which I did try, and actually I'm still on. But then we got to a point where she was like, that's pretty much all I can do for you. And so I started shopping around because I wasn't totally pleased with the answers she was giving me, or in this case, not giving me.
And you wanted to feel better, right?
And I wanted to feel
If this
better,
is
right?
all there is, there's got to be more, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I have to be able to do more, right? I have to be able to get better. So I started going to another rheumatologist. Similar type experience. We tried a couple things, but then I got to a point where we hit a wall. And this time it was insurance wouldn't approve what she wanted me to try. So there were no more suggestions. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try a new doctor. And this time, this one stuck. It's the one that I'm still going to. And what was significant about going to her was that she was the first doctor in talking with me about fibromyalgia that actually asked me what I was doing in my life to help manage it that was not just medication.
I love that.
Yeah. So she was asking me about what kind of exercises am I doing? What am I doing? Yoga, like gentle movement type things. What kind of food am I eating? What does that look like? So that really stuck with me and made me even more motivated to go and research those other options. She also suggested possibly trying like acupuncture. And so I went down that path and went to an acupuncture who was really influential in helping me kind of start getting better. And she helped me with my nutrition as well as the actual acupuncture appointments. And she was the one who really convinced me to try going gluten free. And it was so scary at that point. I was like, I can't do it because I love bread. And same with dairy. I love cheese. How could I live without pizza?
If you think about all the things that are bread and cheese, right?
Yeah.
Grilled cheese, pasta, pizza.
Mhm. And they were all my favorite things.
Yeah, a lot of those are comfort foods for many of us, right?
But the thing that really got me when I met with her was two things. First, she told me it doesn't have to be all or nothing. If I just start with maybe one new recipe a week that doesn't have gluten in it, and then after 7 weeks, I have 7 recipes and I could go a whole week. Same with the dairy. So I just took it step by step. And then the other thing she told me that really hit home was a lot of these things, like autoimmune conditions, like fibromyalgia, a lot of other conditions are hereditary. And if not completely hereditary, there are components of them that are hereditary. And so, not just doing it for myself, but doing it for my kids in a way that I am inspiring them and setting them up how they can eat, showing them how best to nourish your body and take care of your body, that would make a bigger impact. And so that really got that, okay, I'm really doing it for them, not just for myself, because I could cheat myself. That's fine. I can have macaroni and cheese. That's my favorite thing. But when it comes to my kids, I really want to do better. So that really made it a big deal.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And I was actually just going to ask you, a lot of people with kids, when you have to start making these dietary changes, it feels like now I have to make two things. I have to make the special thing for me, and then I've got to make food for everybody else. So, how did you balance that? Did everybody eat the same thing or?
Yes and no. Sometimes we all eat the same things, and sometimes we don't. So it was really difficult to actually convince my husband to eat like how I'm eating because he's Italian and all of his
Yeah.
favorite things just like at mine, all of my favorite things, they all have gluten and dairy in them. So the biggest thing is the fact that I'm the primary cooker in the house. So I usually am the one to do the grocery shopping. I plan the meals for the week. I cook them. So it really is up to me. So that was like the first step. That made it a lot easier because I was in control. And then the second thing was, I guess I should say fundamentally what changed for me was I tried to just do whole foods, less processed foods. And when you try that, it's not that difficult to get kids on board and eating things. Like they will eat raw carrots and raw broccoli or even honestly kale. My kids love kale, but usually only when I grow it, which I think is very strange. So if I cook it, they tend to not want to eat it. But if they can pick it off the plant themselves, they love it. And when I'm making something like now, it's been I think 2 years since I've been gluten and dairy free. So I have a large plethora of different kinds of meals that I circle through. But so now when I cook things like I have a pad thai recipe that I usually do once a week. My husband and I love it, but both my kids are picky enough that they don't like all of those flavors mixed together, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to.
Yes.
They like everything separate. So the biggest thing that I try to do is when I'm cooking a whole bunch of things together, I just sit aside some things before I cook them and I give those to my kids. So in the instance of the pad thai, I put peppers in mine. So I'll chop some fresh peppers, set them aside and give them hummus if they want to dip the hummus, but I put the peppers, the rest of them in my meal. So things like that where I can piece together. Or the other thing that we do frequently is tacos because the kids love to be a part of it and make it. But it's also still like you get to pick what you want in it. So, like, my husband can still have the flour tortilla, but I'm going to have the corn tortilla. And my kids, one likes beans, the other one likes meat and doesn't like beans. So we can pick and choose what we want. And that's how it's worked for me and my family.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that you're giving them choices, but the choices are like not just anything, right? It's not what do you want to eat today? It's pulled out of what it is that you're doing. I think that's great.
Yeah. And I think that's most important because with fibro bodies, I don't have an exorbitant amount of energy to make 5 different meals. It's just not feasible. And so I always try to come up with a meal that I can degenerate as needed so that everyone's happy.
We used to do that at my house. My sister did not like tomatoes. And if we were having spaghetti or something, you don't just mix the sauce onto the noodles. You have the noodles and the sauce separate. And so she can do cheese and butter if she wants or whatever it is and make different things out of the same ingredients. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So you were talking about working with your acupuncturist. We got on the subject of diet. How much did that change things for you? Like pulling out the apples and the carrots, going gluten-free. How much did that help you?
So it helped a lot, actually. So I remember, like, at the start of giving up all the things, I remember just thinking it's such a web of all of these different things that I need to take out. I don't know what symptoms are caused by what food, or I just wish that I could get to a point where I knew. And so then I could easily make a decision, even though I know gluten might do something for me. I could still make that conscious decision if I wanted to put gluten in my body. Then I know the risk and I could take that accordingly. So now, retrospectively, I realize that carrots essentially put me in bed. Like I have to be in bed rest for 2 or 3 days, depending on the amount that I'm exposed to. So, especially if it's hidden, like one time I went to a restaurant and I had a bolognese sauce. I didn't think to tell them that I couldn't eat carrots. And it turned out that there were carrots all throughout it. And I ended up in bed pretty much for 2 or 3 days recovering. So that is definitely the more severe for me. But apples usually aren't so bad. It's more of an allergy type reaction. So I get like the nasal kind of dripping sort of things. So that's a more manageable. And usually, if I take an allergy medication, I can skirt some of those symptoms. So if I get an exposure, I can handle it. But I found out that gluten gives me terrible headaches. So now I know when I end up having like just get these like terrible kind of migraine type headaches, and I can tell, and especially because it's the kind that are like behind your eyes. You know what I'm talking about? And when I have some sort of exposure, and I might not even know I had an exposure, but if I start getting one of those headaches, I can be like, oh, there must have been gluten in that. And there are certain things now that I know that I can do to try to limit my healing process from that exposure. At first, it was definitely a long learning process. And with dairy, it's more of an intestinal pain. Like my body just can't handle processing it. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. So, how much did that, like thinking about your fibro symptoms, how much do you think cutting those things out of your diet like reduced your we were calling fibromyalgia at the time?
So if I had to put a percentage to it, I would say the gluten was probably 15, 20%. It was pretty high because I was definitely eating gluten all the time. And then I'd say dairy was more like 10 or 5%. But the carrots, so it's interesting too with the carrots and apples, the actual allergies that I have, because I was eating them all the time, I was more used to them. So I didn't initially, when I was diagnosed with the allergy, I wasn't having that severe of a reaction. But when I eliminated it, that's when I started having the terribly severe
Right.
reaction
So
to
if
it.
you have it now, it'll be worse than when you were eating it all the time.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think initially eliminating those two things were probably another 20%.
That's pretty good. If you add all those up, that's about 50%, right? So cutting your symptoms in half. But also, I want to be clear too for you listening. Food allergies does not equal fibromyalgia. They are two different things. And you can have both of them, right? Lauren is talking about. And remember, fibromyalgia acts like an amplifier. So if you're eating dairy and it's causing stomach pain, intestinal pain, fibro is just going to turn that up. And now you've got pain other places and the pain is greater, right? So it just amps it all up. And so when we can cut out these triggers, whether it's food or have shoulder surgery for a bad shoulder, or whatever it is that you do, and we can cut out the triggers, it helps to lower everything. So I think that's great. But you didn't stop there either.
No.
So what else? Because I know that's what everybody's wanting to know. How did you get better? And this was just a piece of it.
Yes, yes. So I also hired my own certified fibromyalgia coach, and that was pretty early. It was still like winter after I was diagnosed. So it was pretty early on before I went dairy and gluten free, before I had acupuncture. And my coach really worked on with me how I could still live my life, still be a mom to my kids, still homeschool, and still be getting better, still make progress towards healing. And that is super important. And one, she helped me with the education of, instead of having, because I had no time to read books on my own. So instead of having to have this library of books I had to read, every time I met with her, she would give me another couple tips of things that I could try that could help alleviate, just chip away at the block to get closer to healing. And one of the things I would say really stands in my mind was when I remember her telling me, so I had a 2-year-old at the time, and I, of course, was picking my 2-year-old up all the time. And I hadn't realized, because I'd had kids that I was picking up all the time for 4 years now. So I hadn't realized how much pain that was actually giving my body. And I remember she was telling me about how, let's think outside the box. What could we do differently instead of completely not picking up my child, but maybe I have her on a chair and I pick her up from the chair as opposed to the floor. Or I only pick her up in certain circumstances. Or when I pick her up, maybe I'm sitting down. Thinking about it in a different way instead of just, I have to do this and I have to do it this way because this is the way I've always done it. But examining how I could do it differently and therefore maybe not create my body so much pain, that made a huge difference. And just re-examining all the different things I was doing on a daily basis that I wasn't even thinking about. I was giving no mind to. I was just on autopilot.
Those are my favorite things to do with clients. I think that what you just described there is like the secret to a good fibro life, is just re-examining everything that we do and asking, do I need to do this? I think that's a good important question too. Do I need to do this? But also, how can I do this differently? Are there tools? Are there different ways, different times, different places? Like sometimes it's as simple as, like you said, it's not that we're not going to pick our kids up at all. We're just going to pick them up and put them on our lap instead of pick them up and carry them around the house or something. Yeah.
Exactly. And it does make a huge difference, and it adds up tremendously.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you had a great coach. Shout out to Julie.
Yes, I did.
Who had lots of experience with exactly those kinds of things. So, what was that like in your journey to talk to somebody who had been there, done that, and found a way through it?
It was incredible. That's the best way I could describe it. Meeting someone, one, I had never met anyone else that had fibromyalgia
Yeah, you didn't
before.
even know what it was. So, this
I
is all
didn't
new
even know
to
what it
you.
was.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So not only meeting someone else who had it, but meeting a mom who had it when she had very young kids, that made everything so much more relatable to me. And when I would describe anything I was going through, Like, just even, how was your day? Well, I did XYZ. She knew exactly what I was talking about and exactly what types of challenges that would bring to a fibro body. And that to me was invaluable. I needed that support, and I didn't even fully realize that I had needed that support. But things that were stressful after, especially after getting the diagnosis initially, like finding all these different doctors, finding the different types of specialists, figuring out what types of treatment there are and what things I could try. All of that was very overwhelming. And Julie was able to help me compartmentalize that, prioritize those things. What do I want to do now? And it's just so much easier to have someone to go through all of that with and help you develop and create your team of specialists that can really support you to heal.
Because it does take a village. It really does. Like we talk about how there's no one magic bullet in terms of one medication that's going to fix all your problems, but there's also not just one doctor, right? It takes a whole team of people to keep this body running. Yes, very much. So you talked about some of the things that you worked on with Julie. How much do you think that helped in your percentages that we were talking about? How much did working with Julie and the things that she helped you do, how much did that help you feel better? I know a lot of those things were overlapping, right? Like she probably was working with you while you implemented some of those other things.
Yes, which makes it harder to identify an exact percentage. But I would say it was probably 40% of my healing. It was a large percentage because she was there to help me. And she didn't push me in any one direction. Like, I was always in control of what I wanted to do, what I wanted my healing journey to look like. But when I made a decision, she was there to help and support me in that decision and help me figure out, when I went gluten-free, help me figure out what types of products I could use, things like that. And I even remember, I had completely forgotten about this because I feel like it was a lifetime ago. But when I was diagnosed and when I first started working with Julie, I was actually teaching a dance class for infants. And I loved it because I loved working with infants, and I had my kids in the classes and things like that. And of course, I had to go virtual for during COVID. But she helped me realize that I would teach one day a week. And after I would teach, it took so much energy and effort. And even though I loved it, I had to recover for a full day afterwards. And then I couldn't be with my family and I couldn't take care of my kids. And I remember at one point coming to that realization and telling her and breaking down and crying because it was such an emotional feeling and realization for me that I needed to stop doing this so that I could get better. And it doesn't mean that just because I couldn't do it then doesn't mean I could never do it again, which is another thing she helped me realize. It's this new norm that we're coming up with to get better doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. It isn't stagnant. It can change and evolve. And if I wanted to do it again today, I probably could. I would do it differently. I would set it up all differently.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I probably could do it because I'm in a healthier place to do it. So she really helped support that and all of these choices that I was making along the way.
Yes. I don't know about you, but when my doctor told me to go gluten-free, it seemed like so overwhelming, right? So much of my diet was already, what am I going to eat now? And if it hadn't been for my coach's help at the time, I don't think I could have done it at all. It was just so overwhelming and so seemed so impossible. And having her help to break all of that stuff down made it possible to do, right? And also what you're talking about with her support when you make these decisions, sometimes the people around us and the world around us don't really want us to change. They like us like we are and deciding, oh, I'm not going to teach that class. Maybe the other people in your life are like, what are you doing? You love that. Are you crazy? You need somebody to tell you you're not crazy.
I do. I did. That's exactly what I needed in the time.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing, too, we've talked about it here a lot on the podcast. And after my interview with Lauren, I'll list out a few of these extra episodes that are popping into my mind as we talk. But one of them is that your world revolves around your healing, not your illness. And you making that decision of, if I want to get better, I can't do this. It's thinking about life not from the standpoint of my fibro won't let me do this, but from the standpoint of I'm choosing something else because I want a different outcome, right?
Exactly. And that's a very small but very important distinction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So you worked with Julie for a while. I think you said it was about a year or so, I think, right?
Yes, it was about a
Yeah.
year. Yeah. But we
Yep.
didn't stop communicating after that year. I still kept in touch.
And then you went about a year without Julie's help. And after that time, you decided to take the certified fibromyalgia advisor class. And now you're in training to become a certified fibromyalgia coach. So if you're listening and you feel like Lauren's your person, she is taking new clients. She's one of our student coaches you can schedule with on our Find a Coach page. But let's talk a little bit about what that was like, doing it on your own, doing it with Julie, taking the class. They're all different experiences, but for those listening who aren't on the inside like we are and don't know the difference, why don't you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Obviously, I talked a lot about what it was like to work with Julie, and going a year without working with her was, I thought I was, or I know that I was set up for success. And I kept doing all the things that we implemented together in our time together. But realizing when I decided to talk to you, Tami, about doing the advisor class, I was realizing that I was in a place where I had slipped back some. And even though I was chugging along and doing all the things that I thought I needed to do, but I had stopped analyzing and thinking about what it was I was actually doing and why I was doing it and what its purpose was. I started pushing the envelope a little bit, and I wasn't doing things preventatively. I was doing things reactionary, just little things like that. So I definitely needed, I would say, a tune up. But really, what made me interested in the advisor course and then in becoming a coach is I really decided that I was now in a place, because both of my kids were starting school full time. So I was now in a place where I felt like I had a little more bandwidth, and I was looking for my next thing, right? My next inspiration, call it whatever you want. And I internally looked at myself and decided I've come such a long way that I would really love to impart some of the things I've learned onto someone else and help a person along their journey and make a difference that way and advocate for somebody else and help them get their team together. So I reached out to you, Tami, and in taking the advisor course, what was so interesting is we at the beginning of the advisor course, we took the a little exam to get a rating of what our pain level was. And when we took that, I realized, wow, I'm not as in a good of spot as I was before, like when I left working with Julie. I thought I was just as good as when I left working with Julie. So it was a bit of a kind of a shock, a realization, because I was like, I know most of these things. I still had more to learn, but it was interesting getting back to the basics of what Julie initially had taught me in the advisor class and kind of starting over. It wasn't from scratch because obviously there was information that I already knew and remembered, but it was good to re-examine all of those things and the different actions I was taking on a daily basis and what my daily pain level was. It was higher than I thought it was because I had stopped managing and recording that on a daily basis and reflecting on it. So getting back to some of those basics really made a difference. And I was funny or interesting at the end of the class in taking that quiz again. I hadn't made as much of an improvement as I had hoped, but I think that really was because I had worked with Julie and
Absolutely. Yep.
I wasn't starting from zero, right? I was starting at 20% or whatever. So I was a little disappointed, but any improvement is always great, right? It's better than nothing.
Yes. Yes. Do you mind if we share your real numbers?
No, absolutely.
Okay, so she's talking about the Fibromyalgia Impact Questionnaire score. And when she started the advisor class, she was at 56.3, which is pretty classic. That is a pretty average number across most fibro people. That's probably how you're feeling right now. And by the end of the class, she had improved to 46.3, which is an 18% improvement. Now, on average, our advisor class graduates improve about 50%, 50, and yours was only about 20. But with what we were just talking about, all those other changes you made, you had probably already improved about 50%.
Yes,
And this was
exactly.
like your bonus 20. Now, I want to share the second half of that story, which is right before we started recording, I asked Lauren if she would mind taking the Fibromyalgia Impact Questionnaire again, and so we could share an updated score because it's been about a year since your last score. And so it is, as of today, 10.3, which is an 82% improvement from where you started. And honestly, I've asked one of my doctor friends to do some research and find out if there's a score where if you don't score a certain amount that it's not really fibro, but I don't have the answer to that yet. But it seems to me that 10 is very low. So, congratulations on that. That is also our average for people graduating from our coach class, which Lauren is in right now, is actually 75%. So, you're doing better than that. Most people graduate from the coach class and they are nearly symptom free. So, what is life like for you now?
Now, I would say I'm probably more active than before the pandemic, before I got my diagnosis. I have a dog now and I go on daily walks with her. One of the things that Julie had me do early on was scale back my step count to try to minimize the amount of energy I was putting in every day. At that point, I think we scaled it back to 1,000, 1,200 steps a day, which is pretty near impossible to do,
Especially with two little kids.
especially with two little kids. But now on a daily basis, I get 8,000, 10,000 steps a day, and I have no additional pain. And on those days where I've even taken my kids to Disney World and had 20,000 plus steps a day and had no additional pain. So it's unbelievable. From where I was when I was diagnosed, I could never have imagined being here now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's what it's all about, right? Is being able to go out and live our lives and do the things that we want to do. Take your kids to Disney World, whatever it is, right? Yeah. And now you're getting to help other people, just like your coach helped you. So, what has that been like? Passing that on, paying it forward.
It's been so rewarding meeting other people who honestly were just like me. And my clients, when I first meet them, one of the things that they usually say right off the bat is, you get me. Like, you understand where I'm coming from. I've had a client or two where I was the first person with fibromyalgia that they've talked to. So just like I was. And it's amazing to be able to make these suggestions, like these little suggestions on like really minor corrections, minor things that they could try that can potentially make such a large impact and difference in their daily functioning. It's incredible. And then being able to be there for them when they need it and walk them through what to prioritize and what doctors to talk to and what to talk to those doctors about and what types of medications or therapies and things to try. Most people don't even know what are the options out there. And it's amazing to be able to give someone options when they feel like there are no options and they've hit rock bottom and they don't know what to do and they feel like they just have to get used to how life is now. And so it's amazing to be able to be with someone and advise them to get better and see them actually get better and do better.
Yes, yes, that is what it is all about. I love that so much. And you were telling me before we started recording too about one of your clients and some of the things that we help people with. We are fibromyalgia coaches, but because fibromyalgia is an amplifier and affects all areas of our lives, we help people with a lot of different kinds of stuff, right? Like you were telling me you were helping one of your clients with her migraines, right? And fibromyalgia is going to amplify that too. So if we can have fewer migraines, we have lower fibro pain, right? And that made a huge difference for her.
Yes, it did. It did. From the time I first started working with her, she was having migraines consistently almost every day, waking up with them. And by the time last worked, the time we last discussed, she was maybe having one migraine a week. So huge difference. So it's really incredible to see.
It is. It is. One of the clients I had years and years ago, I actually helped her buy tires for her car because her brain fog was keeping her from being able to make some decisions. Her fatigue was keeping her from being able to go out and do things, but yet not having it done was causing her all this extra stress, which made the fatigue and the brain fog worse. So it's like this vicious cycle. So having somebody come alongside and just help you step by step through things, it's amazing the things that we help people with that seem like it's not fibromyalgia, but yet it is.
It's all linked. It's all related.
It is all together. It is all together. So, as we wrap up today, Lauren, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing all of this. I think there's some really great tips that you've had in here for people, especially with little ones, but I think apply to all of us too. So, thank you for that. But I would love for you just to speak to that mom out there, particularly those moms with little kids who are wondering how on earth they are supposed to juggle it all. And just speak to them from your heart.
So, mom, you're doing great. First of all, there's nothing wrong with you. But I want you to know, most of all, that you are not alone. There are things you can do that you can try to get better. And you need to make yourself a priority. That's important because without you being in good health and good spirits, you can't possibly help your family and help them be in good health and good spirits as well. So it's really important that you focus on yourself, but also you need to make room for yourself. And I say that, and I realize it's a lot harder to do than, than I make it sound, but that's what I'm here for. That's what a coach can help you do. Find those little things and those little amounts of time in between all of the things you have to do for your kids, for your husband, for other people in your family, whoever you're taking care of. And it's important that you have those moments, even if it's 5 minutes here and there, to do something for yourself so that you can help everyone else around you. Because without you, it doesn't work, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for that, Lauren. And if you're listening, if Lauren was speaking to you right there, then you can schedule a consultation with her. Just go to findafibrocoach.com. We'll also have the link in today's show notes. This is episode 143. So it's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/143. You'll find a link where you can schedule a consultation. Just talk to Lauren or talk to one of of our other coaches and just see that consultation is exactly that. It's for us to consult with you, to talk about what's working, what's not working, what you've tried, what your goals are, how we can help you. And there's no obligation for that other than just showing up. Please don't block a time on our calendar and don't show up. We want you to show up. But other than that, there's no obligation. And you can meet with someone and see how this could maybe make a difference for you. So thank you again, Lauren. It was awesome having you on, for sharing your story and for sharing all your good tips.
Thank you so much, Tami. It was great.
And that wraps up my interview with student coach in training, Lauren Vazzano. As Lauren and I were talking, I thought of a few additional episodes that you might find helpful, things that relate to what Lauren and I discussed today. First, if you are needing to find a new doctor, like Lauren mentioned, having to do a couple of times, then be sure and check out episode 140. In that Ask the Coach episode, I talk about why you might need to find a new doctor and give you some tips on how to find a good one that is going to meet your needs. This is just a few episodes back, so it should be pretty easy to find, but we will also have a link in today's show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/143. Now, if you have got kids at home and you're trying to juggle taking care of yourself with taking care of your kids, you might also want to check out my interview with Julie Schiffman. This is Lauren's coach, in episode 37, Raising Kids When You Have Fibromyalgia. Another great episode is episode 32, Your World Revolves Around Your Healing, Not Your Illness. As Lauren said, this is a small but very important distinction that is going to change how you approach managing your fibromyalgia. We'll have links to both of those episodes in today's show notes. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about the classes Lauren is taking, if you're looking for your next thing, as she put it, be sure to check out our special Be a Coach podcast series. You can sign up to have the series sent to you directly, along with some bonus episodes, like a replay of our virtual open house that has a lot of details on when our classes start, how they work, how they're fibro-friendly, and all of that. To sign up for that special series for free, just go to our show notes, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/143, or visit beafibrocoach.com. That's B, like the word B, B-E, afibrocoach.com. Our next class begins at the end of this month. We would love to have you join us. Graduates of our Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor class improve their fibromyalgia symptoms an average of about 50%. And graduates of our coach class are usually nearly symptom-free when they graduate, just like Lauren is. Of course, the way averages work, right? Some improve more, some less. And since each person and medical situation is unique, your results could vary. Now, I asked Lauren what she felt you needed to know before the end of this episode, and she said, "You're not alone, you can get better, and you need a team." And I just wanted to repeat that in case those three things did not come through clearly in our interview. You are not alone. All of us have been there, done that. We have fibromyalgia ourselves, and we've gotten better, which means you can get better. I have no doubts that you can feel better than you do right now today. Heck, even I could feel better than I do right now today. And lastly, you need a team. If you are struggling to do this all on your own, please know that there are people like Lauren, like myself, who are here and we can help you. To schedule a consultation with a student like Lauren or one of our coaches, go to findafibrocoach.com. First, you'll complete an application that tells us a little bit about you and your situation. Then you'll choose the type of coach who is best for you. We have scholarship consultations available. Those are for free. We have consultations with student coaches like Lauren. Those are available at a discounted rate while they're still in training. And then we have our certified coaches. These are your best choice if you have a complicated case, if you're very symptomatic, if you have lots of other conditions along with your fibromyalgia, then I recommend actually meeting with a certified coach because they are fully trained and just have more experience and expertise. But if that's not an option for you, you can always meet either for a scholarship consultation or at a discounted rate with one of our students. Honestly, all of our students and coaches can help you. So just pick the one that feels like the best fit for you and your situation. And if you're feeling nervous about meeting with one of our coaches, I want to share what Deb had to say about meeting with her coach, Kim, as this week's listener shout out. Deb emailed me and said, "My consult with Kim went great!" Exclamation point. We discovered we have a lot in common. She was an excellent listener, and I feel she would be a nice fit to coach me. I signed the contract today. I can't wait! Exclamation point. Thank you so much for that, Deb. I love getting feedback on our coaches, especially our students, because they are still in training and I can pass that feedback on to them. And I'm so glad that it was a good fit for you. Just in case you're curious, as I say that, if you ever meet with somebody who is not a good fit for you, and sometimes that happens, that's nothing to do with you, nothing to do with the coach, just the chemistry isn't there, we do offer a one-time rematch where you can meet with another student or coach for free. So no, you're not locked in. Now, as I wrap up, I just want to remind you actually of our special Stories of Hope podcast series. This is another private playlist of episodes that we have, like our Be a Coach series, only this one focuses on those stories of hope. It's interviews with our students, our graduates, and our clients, where they're sharing their stories of hope, where they are talking about how they got better. And this, honestly, it's the perfect thing to keep in your back pocket, to keep you motivated, to give you hope when you're in need of that encouragement. If you'd like to sign up for this special series, again, just visit today's show notes. You can also sign up at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/stories of hope, all run together like one word, stories of hope. All right, that does it for today. I will see you all back here next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.